Candace Owens and conspiracy theories is the topic I want to discuss right now with this little video. And what I want to do is I want to preface this with a documentary that I watched a couple years ago with my dad about strange disappearances of people out in the woods and stuff. And it was a very interesting documentary series. There were two of them. It was Missing 411, and there was the second one, which was more freaky than the first one. That one's called Missing 411: The Hunted. And I guess it's called it because it focuses more on hunters who disappeared, and I think the idea is that it's more compelling because hunters usually are really good, at not getting lost and how to handle themselves in the wilderness, and yet these guys suddenly go missing. So it was a very fascinating documentary series. I consider myself something of a skeptic of a lot of the paranormal stuff. My dad is a big believer that Bigfoot perhaps once existed, but may not anymore. And that's a reasonable position. I'm a skeptic of whether or not Bigfoot ever really existed, aliens and all that stuff. The UFOs, I'm more convinced those are probably spiritual in nature. But I like to watch things with an open mind and be willing to accept data and information. And there you go. So when I'm watching this series, and there was one case in The Hunted that really caught me. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that in this case, they really went by helicopter to the area where this guy went missing, like the place where he took a wrong turn. They pointed that out directly from the helicopter, where they found some of his shoes and other belongings and stuff like that. So that really got me. It kind of really made me, it immersed me into the story significantly, to the point that I really went myself to do my own. When I get really into something, I start wanting to look into everything I possibly can find about it. And the case was the case of Aaron Hedges. I think that was the guy's name. I know his first name was Aaron, but I think the last name was Hedges. And yeah, this one really, really got me fascinated. I even went on Google Earth to the area and stuff, and I was just looking around and whatever, and it's just very fascinating. Now, if you just watch the documentary, okay, if that's just all you watch, you will notice, what it's set up as is, so what happens is they're getting ready to go. Aaron is a hunter, was a hunter, spoiler alert. He was a hunter. He goes with some buddies to their campsite to prepare for a weekend or something like that of hunts. So they go to their campsite. Along the way to the campsite, apparently the mule carrying Aaron's stuff gets spooked, dumps all his stuff, and he loses a bunch of his stuff. And so Aaron is upset, and whatever. And so when you go to the campsite, what Aaron decides to do is he decides to go to a secret cache that he had to replace some of the stuff he lost. So what he does is, see if I can do this from your perspective. He goes down this trail, and there's like a point where the trail kind of goes up. Now it keeps going this way, it goes further east, but there's a point where it goes up like that. And that goes, kind of curves around like that to where this cache was, apparently. That's where Aaron's secret stuff was. And that's where he goes. Okay, so he goes there and he grabs his stuff. And as he's on his way back, and he comes back to that little fork in the road, a little three-way, he doesn't go back to the camp. He actually goes the opposite direction. And we know this apparently because Aaron has, I guess they have like these, I'm not a hunter, obviously, as you can tell, so I'm not familiar with all the equipment that these guys have, but he apparently had one of these radio things with a GPS thing on it as well. So I guess whenever you press the button to, talk to people, the talk button, it pings your location on the GPS where you're at, which is a neat little handy device. And it pinged him when he radioed back to the campsite. It pinged him going in a different direction, which was the opposite direction, going east rather than west, back to the other guys. And when you're watching the documentary, it's like, that's really, really weird. why would he do that? This is a guy. It's all set up like he knows these areas. Aaron knows his place. He would have seen, the road split, and he would have known you're supposed to go that way and not go that way. Like he would have known that. And the sheriff, who I guess was part of the search, he's talking to the documentary guy. I forget his name, but and he's like, yeah, absolutely, yeah, you would. You'd think he would have known about this, and that's the way it's painted. So Aaron got lost somehow, some way, in a place where he shouldn't have gotten lost. Somehow got lost, and he goes the opposite direction. About a day later, they start looking for him, which is already weird, but you can kind of understand it. He's a hunter, so they're probably thinking he can take care of himself, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, so they start search and rescue. Sort of spoiler alert again, that radio signal Aaron sent the last time anybody ever talked to him. But so he's gone in the woods, a storm comes in, it forces them to call off the search for a while, a couple days until the storm dies down, and then they resume it. And then as they're resuming it, as they follow the trail where Aaron was last seen going, they start to find things. They start to find belongings that appear to belong to Aaron. So they find like in backpacks with cushion in them, they find that insulation cushion in there, like removed and whatever, which may indicate somebody was trying to keep warm. They also find a pair of boots, like a pair of shoes. Aaron, they apparently belong to Aaron. So and the way they find them, it's not like they're just kind of one over there and one's way over there and whatever. No, they find them neatly placed, like somebody just took them and just placed them nice and neat right underneath a bush, or right next to a bush or something like that. And so, okay, really, really weird. It's almost like Aaron. Why is Aaron removing clothing in the cold? And they continue to go and follow that trail, and on and on and on. Now, further down the mountain towards the west are like ranches and stuff. Way out. Remember, I forgot to mention this is way out in Montana. So they find, there's these ranches down there. They're kind of like right at the bottom of like kind of like the valley of the mountain range and stuff. Now up on top, sort of in the northern valley area, there's like this ridge line that looks down to one of these ranches. And on that ridge line, near a rock or something, they find like a canteen, just nicely placed there. And they find some like wrappers from snacks or whatever. And the conclusion you draw is somebody just kind of probably just sat up there and just had a little snack. And again, so the way it's set up is Aaron is, he's in trouble. Something's wrong. He's in a fight for his life. He's out here barely trying to survive. And the assumption, therefore, would be that if you're out there and you, first of all, the weirdness that you got lost in a place where you should never have gotten lost in, okay, that's already weird enough. But then you are now desperately trying to survive. You'd want to be finding, therefore, any kind of civilization you can find. Well, if Aaron's was sitting on that rock, he was sitting on that rock looking down very clearly to a ranch where there was civilization. There was potential help. He could have gone down there to get help that he needed. And yet he didn't. He instead just sat on that rock, apparently, and just... And that's just one of the few things that they go through, the findings that they had. And it's just all a jumbled mess. Like, what in the world happened here? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I remember watching it just thinking to myself, like, dude, this is freaking weird. Like, what happened to this guy? Was there some kind of mind control thing going on? Was it some Bigfoot thing? I don't know. Just don't know. But like I said, that's the way it was set up in the documentary. It's really fascinating. I really encourage you to go check it out. It's very interesting to see the way it's presented in the documentary. But now, again, like I said, being me, I got curious. And I wanted to find as much as I possibly could about that case. So I started to just look around and just see if there was any other little details I could find. Turns out there were a lot of details. In fact, details that weren't really mentioned in the documentary. And so, what are those details? Let's start here. Let's go back to the beginning. Aaron was apparently an alcoholic. He was very depressed. He was having a problem with his marriage and things like that. Home, family life problems and whatever. He was also apparently on antidepressants. And so that made him moody. And the part where he loses his stuff from that mule, apparently that did happen, according to his buddies and stuff. But like afterwards, he became sort of insufferable. They didn't want him to go on the trip in the first place. So apparently, Aaron went on the trip because he recognized this problem and he wanted to try and detox, you might say, and just get out away from people and detox. And that sounds like a good idea, but if antidepressants and drugs, especially when you're going through withdrawals, they can make you do some weird things. They can cause some weird stuff, and it's actually probably not a good idea to be out in the wilderness when stuff like that happens. Just judgment gets clouded. And anyways, so that's apparently what Aaron is going through. Is he's just trying to detox, and he's trying to just be secluded. And so all of a sudden, when you consider that, and then you go back to when he decides to take a different turn after he goes up to the cache by himself. And then after he gets his cache, he's on it, sort of, you think, on his way back, but all of a sudden he decides to go the opposite direction. Well, when you consider the fact that Aaron apparently wants to be alone and wants to sort of go through withdrawals alone, suddenly that makes a lot more sense. Suddenly you think maybe he didn't actually get lost by some weird paranormal thing happening. Maybe Aaron just decided, you know what, I'm not even going to go back to camp. I'm just going to go my own way. I just needed some time alone, and just went off and did his own thing. Now then, what happens though if we come to the point where we find the boots? Well, how do we explain that weird thing? Well, once again, apparently, if there's been a lot of people who commented on the various videos about Aaron Hedges, and a lot of these people are hunters, enthusiasts and stuff like that. And so apparently something that hunters will do, they'll carry different kinds of shoes. And when they spot potential game and they're going to stalk their prey, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll take off their more heavier or louder shoes to put on much more quieter shoes so that they can be more quiet. And so once again, when you take that into consideration, finding those shoes there, nicely placed there, suddenly makes a lot more sense. It's not Aaron weirdly removing clothing in the middle of a snowstorm. It's probably Aaron tracking game. So then we get to, that starts to explain even more things, like when we come to the canteen. Because if we assume that Aaron was, if we have ground to assume that Aaron was in deep trouble and he was in a fight for survival, then it wouldn't make any sense for Aaron to just sit there and look down at safety and never go down to safety. But if we consider everything else we just mentioned, it makes much more sense, because suddenly Aaron's just probably during the day, maybe a nice day or before the storm hit or whatever, just decided to take a break and just chill out on a rock. And it's a nice view up here. It's probably just nice. It's just nice and quiet, and just decided to, Now how he ended up dead is another story, because they did eventually find his remains years later after he went missing. I think like a year after he went missing, actually. Now that's a mystery. That's probably going to remain a mystery. We don't really know, and we can't really know what happened to him. So that's the story of Aaron Hedges. That's the real story. When you actually include all the rest of the context that the documentary left out, well, then all of a sudden, so everything else makes sense. Now, why am I bringing all that up? Why am I pointing all that out? You see, there is this principle, and let me just be clear here. I'm not mentioning this now because I've heard of it now. Like, I've known about this principle for quite a while, and I've always tried to apply it in everything I do. As somebody who's actually into conspiracies, who is also loves history, loves to study history and stuff like that, there's this principle. It's called Occam's razor. And in Occam's razor, what it simply means is this: the simplest explanation is the preferred one. And why that's an important principle to consider is because when you're dealing with a situation in which you have missing data and you just don't have, there's blackout points, there's gaps of data, there's gaps of information. Like Aaron Hedges, again, the only person who knows what happened to Aaron Hedges is Aaron, and he's dead. So we can't ever truly know what happened to him. What we can do is we can take the data that we have and then formulate a plausible conclusion. See, there's now what we can. So what does that mean? It means, so what likely happened to Aaron? Did aliens do something to him? Did Bigfoot do something to him? Now, it's a possibility that is in the realm of possibilities because of the nature of the world we live in. That's not beyond a possibility. But see, there's a difference between possibilities and probabilities, okay? And that's where Occam's razor comes in, because you can have those possibilities, but what does the data point towards? Is it pointing towards any of that stuff? Is it pointing towards Bigfoot and aliens or anything? When you consider all of the data, no, not really. It doesn't seem to be pointing there at all. There's no evidence really to support that. That's just a possibility, but has no actual data to support it. Or at best, very minimalistic stuff. When you consider all of the information, like some of what I just mentioned here, there's much more, but some of what I mentioned here, suddenly that becomes less of a possibility. And you gotta go, well, this one here actually makes a lot more sense. And it's because it makes more sense that is why, according to Occam's razor, you should go with that explanation over and against everything else, because it explains the data much better. It's the simplest explanation. Now, once again, so why are we mentioning this with Candace Owens? Because once again, there is a difference between possibilities and probabilities. When you start with, like that documentary, Missing 411, when you start with the thesis, when you start with what you think happened, and we all kind of have to do that, so it's not totally wrong to do that. When it becomes a problem is when the thesis becomes priority. Because when it becomes priority, then the data you accept is only data that supports the thesis. And you become blinded to data that would contradict or potentially compromise the thesis. And that's where the subtlety comes in. That's where we have to be willing to say, okay, so we've got new information here. Seems a little problematic to what we were saying. And so what do? We have to think about, does this completely destroy the thesis? If it doesn't, then maybe it can be data that is accepted alongside the thesis and we're still okay. But sometimes it actually completely destroys it. Now, if it doesn't destroy it, fine and all. But what if you come across more data that supports the destruction of the thesis? It just starts to pile on and pile on. Eventually, you've got to, if you're going to be an honest thinker, you got to be able to just completely abandon the thesis and go, okay, that didn't work, so we got to come up with another idea of what might have happened. So I take this principle with me and I apply it to everything. So when I apply it to the Charlie Kirk assassination, I remember for a while, I was truly afraid that Charlie Kirk was going to become the next JFK. Like, we were never really going to know. And that would have broken me. It would have just absolutely destroyed me. And I was very grateful when we found out we found the killer. Now, again, there were weird things that happened that definitely you could paint as a setup. See, that's the thing. You can make it really look like a setup if you leave out certain bits of information, or if you reinterpret information. So when you look at Candace Owens and a lot of the receipts that she's provided, text messages, Charlie Kirk saying he's going to be abandoning the pro-Israel cause, You can look at that and go, okay, yes, okay, those are valid. He said that. But then you have to ask the question: does that prove that like Israel was behind it somehow? Well, no, that doesn't prove that Israel's behind Charlie Kirk's assassination. That's quite a leap of information you've just gone to there. Um, so, but that's where a lot of Candace Owens' fans have gone, and they continue to go, and they're just dead certain on this, even though there is no evidence. There's just none. They're convinced Tyler Robinson was set up, even though there is no evidence to support that. And all the evidence actually points in the opposite direction. And then what you do is when you point that out, they just say, well, see, that's the point. They want to make it look like there's evidence. That's the whole point of a patsy. I'm just like sitting there, just like, yeah, but see, the thing is, you should be able to see through it with legitimate evidence, but there's none. You should be able to, there should be some like, look, here's the thing, like, and this may get to the point a little bit more. The way I look at it, the way I'm looking at this, everything here, you need to provide me, in support of your thesis, you got to provide the evidence, and you also have to provide evidence that would make any other possible explanation of this completely invalid. So, when going back to the missing 411 thing, you would have to, if you want to show me that it had something to do with the paranormal, you would have to show evidence of that, but you also have to show that any other possible theory couldn't work. And in my opinion, the guy in the documentary fails to do that. So if another theory explains the data, and not only explains the data, but explains it better than your theory, I'm going to go with the other theory. And so far, I don't see any evidence for the theory that someone else was behind, the government was behind, working with Israel to kill Charlie Kirk. I don't see any evidence for that, nor do I see any way to make the current thesis that we have right now less believable. And outrageous, right? Yeah. How can you say that, Chase? How can you be an honest thinker and say something like that? Look, man, I've been in discussion with some of these people for the last few days, and all I've been doing is just presenting to them, yeah, but this could mean something else. One guy was like telling me, there's no way students shouldn't have been able to be allowed on that roof. It should have been off limits. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's been true with like almost pretty much every single assassination. That guy shouldn't have been there, but yet he was. That doesn't mean that somebody let him in. It might mean there was just a hole in the security. And for the future, they've done better on that stuff. That's all that really means. Then he brings up things like the text messages. There's no way Tyler Robinson wrote that. It's too fake. And I'm like, that could be true. It could be fake. But that doesn't mean Tyler Robinson didn't make those text messages. He could have been creating an alibi to help get his boyfriend out of being in trouble for this, being connected to him, whatever, blah, 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 blah. That's what they could have been doing there. That doesn't immediately mean the government did it. See, like, if I can provide an alternative explanation that fits the data and possibly explains in conjunction with everything else better than yours. See, if your theory has way too many variables, for instance, like this guy was saying to me, well, yeah, well then why did when they were taking Charlie Kirk to the hospital, why didn't there was an ambulance that they passed by, why didn't they give Charlie to the ambulance? So, how does that work? And I'm just like, well, apparently when they got to the hospital, they were considering doing it, but they decided not to. And then when they got to the hospital, the doctors at the hospital said that was a good call to not do that. They actually did the right thing. Now, for you, how do you explain that if you're on the conspiracy theory side? The best explanation is probably to just go, well, then those guys must be in on the conspiracy as well. So in other words, in order for your conspiracy theory to work, you have to add in yet another variable, yet more people who know about the conspiracy and are part of it. More people that it becomes harder and harder to believe it. Your explanation becomes more and more complicated, just much more complicated. Every time you add a variable to the conspiracy, it becomes more complicated, more convoluted. So the simplest one is the best one. And let me just look, if we want to talk about, making it simple to kill Charlie Kirk, if these people wanted to really kill Charlie Kirk, given the day and age we live in, cameras are everywhere. Why would they have people on the ground giving hand signals for all these cameras to see? That would be dumb. Again, you guys are saying that Israel, the people who allegedly killed Ghislaine Maxwell's father and made it look really good, like as if it was an accident. You're saying that same organization was so incompetent that they would just put guys, you know, directly in front of cameras for their hand signals to be seen. Which is they're all doing hand signals. Like, I don't feel like that would be confusing. Why would you need all these guys doing hand signals? Why not just one guy? But yet all of them are doing it, and it's like, wait, who's what? It's so dumb. But why would they do that? Like I was talking to this one lady about it. She's like, oh, hand signals are part of the military. Yeah, actually are military things. I was like, yeah, they are. But see, once again, let's get back into is there another explanation for that? And yes, there is, because yes, there are hand signals in the military, but they use those hand signals when they're like in squads and formation, moving through, as a unit. That's when they usually use the hand signals. They usually don't use those for a sniper to tell him, yeah, go ahead and take the shot or something like that. Like, which apparently there was like 4 different guys affirming the whatever, doing it, different hand signals just to say, take the shot. I mean, it's dumb. It's just really, really dumb. You're adding more variables. It's become more and more convoluted. It makes less and less sense when you actually sit there and think about it. So, and then I also pointed out, so I asked the same lady, I was like, well, why wouldn't they just use like radio communications? And like, it seems like the hand signals things would be a little bit too much exposure. When, especially in today's day and age, in case you didn't notice, we're in the 21st century. There's cameras everywhere, and there's a lot of radios and stuff like that. Why not just see, if you really wanted to do something, why not just say Frank Turek was actually not on the phone with his family? He was on the phone with the shooter. He could have just done that. But see, if you do that, then if you take that wet route, and that's what this lady tried to tell me, she's like, well, they were still using radios. I'm like, well, then what was the point of the hand signals? See, this doesn't, when you really put this under scrutiny, it actually just starts to fall apart, starts to collapse. Now, why in the world has it become so popular? Well, we're living in a day and age of people who are, they're burned. They've been really, truly hurt by Charlie Kirk. I'm truly hurt by Charlie Kirk. And I get it, but see, we have to understand, guys, that doesn't make us stronger because we've been burned, we've been hurt, we've been broken. That actually makes us more vulnerable to lies and deception, distortions, and emotional thinking, which I think definitely Candace Owens has become part of, because she's just going absolutely nuts right now. She's just totally lost it. And she said in a video the other day that's, why hasn't Tyler Robinson's lawyers reached out to her? Because Candace Owens thinks that Tyler Robinson is a patsy. So the lawyers should know, I guess. And so why haven't they reached out to her to and I'm like sitting there thinking, why would they? They're building a case. Like, who in the world are you? You think you're onto something? You're not onto something, Candace. You're really not. This is your way of coping with it, and it's not a good, healthy way to cope with it. But she says, well, why aren't they contacting me? Well, it's because, the patsy has to go down. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so the lawyers are in on it then. The lawyers are, okay. Once again, more variables. It becomes more and more convoluted and less believable. Now, why do most people, continue to believe it? Because like I just told you, they're vulnerable right now. They're very vulnerable. And as a result, they're not thinking clearly. They're just not. And that's one of the problems here, guys. Again, like I said, I believe in conspiracies. I believe we have some questions to ask of Mossad and their involvement in a lot of things. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, before Jeffrey, the JFK assassination. Why are there documents about Israel and Mossad in the documents we do have? It's very weird stuff, certainly. But that doesn't mean we jump on, the Jews for everything, that everything's a conspiracy and the Jews are behind it. And no, it doesn't. We have to be careful, guys. We have to think through this stuff. We got to really, we need to just decompress and just chill out for a bit. Let the legal process do its thing. And there we go, guys. So conspiracy theories, doing proper investigations, it's very important that we don't lose sight of the plot, as it were, when we do our investigations. And we have to really consider, hopefully, some of the things I mentioned in this video, and that I hope is helpful and useful moving forward. I hope and pray that Candace really just decides to really step away. I don't think she's being hunted in an assassination plot. She wouldn't be acting the way she's doing right now, going out in public, if she really was being plotted, or someone was plotting to assassinate her. Like people are saying, they're making excuses for her not to go to the TPUSA thing in a couple days because it's a setup. I'm like, so you're saying TPUSA is trying to get candidates to come down here in person so they can kill her? And do you think that they're going to get away with that? that's not going to look weird at all? Again, guys, the thinking has gone out the window. We're paranoid, and it's not good, guys. It's very unhealthy. What we need to do, guys, you guys need to get off the internet for a while. You are chronically online. Get off the internet. Go to church. Get involved with your church. Because if you really want to honor Charlie's legacy, that's what he would want you to have done. I think Charlie would even say, like, if his ghost could come to us with the Lord telling him what truly happened to him, and it was actually a conspiracy under Israel or something like that, whatever, the demonic influence, let's just say that, Charlie would come back and tell you, look, guys, yes, I was killed by a conspiracy, but I want you guys to not focus on that. I just want you guys to spread light into the world, the light of Christ. Just want you to do that. That's all I want you to do. And the more we do that, guys, the more the darkness just gets exposed. What we're doing right now, what Candace is doing right now, is tearing everything apart. Everything he built is tearing it all apart. That's not what Charlie would have wanted. That's not honoring his legacy. So I just pray and I hope that we will, because we've lost it. It's only taken a couple months, and we've completely forgotten what Charlie was doing. Just, and it's sad. And so my prayer for our country is that we become a people who desire holiness, who desire to be obedient to the Lord every single day. I want to see churches every Sunday filled, the streets empty, because everybody's going to the house of the Lord to worship. I want to see that. I want to see people trusting God more. You see, you guys are saying, we've got to make a difference in the world. We've got to make a difference. That's how you make a difference. We don't make a difference by marching in the streets. And I'm saying this as somebody who believes in Christian nationalism, who believes that a Christian society is necessary. And indeed, I do believe eschatologically it's inevitable. But I'm saying that as one of those people. Nevertheless, we don't do this through political means. We don't do this through marching in the streets. We do it through faithfulness, trusting God. Because, guys, I know a lot of you have said, we're just so mad and we're just tired of people sitting around doing nothing. The Christian preacher who goes out in the streets, preaches, and all that stuff, doesn't go on a podcast, talk about politics, and just goes out in the street, nobody knows who he is, and preaches, he's doing a lot. And I think most of us should do more of that. I don't think we need a bunch more podcasts. I don't think we need a bunch more any of that stuff. We just need more people to be faithful. Just be faithful in whatever God's calling you to do. God's not calling you to be a Nick Fuentes. I don't think he's calling Nick Fuentes to be a Nick Fuentes. I think Nick needs to chill out. He needs to get off the internet for a while. He needs to tell his followers to do the same thing. Candace Owens, same thing. Get back into Christ, because we've lost it. We're losing it badly. And that's my message here at the end of this. So praying for our country, praying for healing, praying for boldness, for people to stop going down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, get in the church, and get active in your church. Build churches, build families, and just take this place the way it's supposed to be taken, not by force, but by the grace of God alone. Soli Deo Gloria. God bless. Bye.